and welcome back for another tutorial. Today we are going to be doing something really fun. We're going to be taking a deep dive into the world of foundation paper piecing. Now I have a few foundation paper piecing pattern tutorials. They are quite old, so please don't go back and look at them because I mean, it's been a minute, right? I've had this channel for 10 years. But today we're going to be talking about Liza Taylor Handmade, her patterns. I was privileged enough to have her over on the podcast, so I'll link the podcast in the description box below if you want to go ahead and listen and watch. She's super sweet, and she has a wonderful little business where she has a subscription-based business, and you can get a new design or multiple designs every month with that subscription fee. And if not, you can purchase her patterns, her past patterns over on her shop. So today we're going to be having some fun looking at her daisy pattern right here. This is the one we're going to be making in today's pattern, but I have a fun little surprise. We're going to be taking a 7-inch block and we're going to be turning it into a fun project in another video. So we're going to make a block and then we're going to turn it into something really fun. So I'm excited about that. I'm just going to show you a few other ones that I've made, which is this butterfly. This is the 7-inch, and then I made the 5-inch. And just know that the other ones that I've made are going to be part of that secret tutorial, so I can't show you those ones, so you're gonna have to stick around for those videos coming very soon. Okay, I'm gonna show you some of the fun quilt blocks that you can grab over at Liza Taylor Handmade. She has a subscription where you will get a new pattern every month, but they are available over on her website or her Etsy shop, so you can grab some of these. So the first one that I have is the daisy block, which I think is so pretty. Then we have the cone flower. We have the busy bee, which if you know me, I call my daughter Honeybee, so of course I had to get anything that has bees on it. And then the take flight block, which is a really pretty butterfly. So in this video, we are going to be making the daisy flower quilt block. Now all of these patterns come with 3-inch by 3-inch, 5-inch by 5-inch, 7-inch by 7-inch, and then 10-inch by 10-inch. So you can really have fun and make, you know, some fairly small projects or really big projects. You know, make a whole quilt with a bunch of 10-inch squares. So you can have a lot of fun with these. Today I'm going to be making the 7-inch daisy flower quilt block. It's going to be nice and big. If you're a beginner, I would definitely recommend using or starting with a larger quilt block, just because things can tend to be a little finicky when you use the smaller blocks. And we want it to be nice and large so that we can understand and see what we're doing. I'll just show you how the pattern is laid out. So here is the 3-inch by 3-inch quilt block. This is the whole thing. So we have all these little sections that we would sew separately, and then you sew them all together to form the daisy flower. This is the 5-inch, which again is getting progressively larger. The 7-inch I've already cut out, but then this is the 10-inch. The 10-inch is on multiple pages because it does get a little big. But like I said, I already cut out my 7-inch by 7-inch quilt block, and I didn't do it very precisely. If you wanted to cut it out following the dotted lines, you can do that, but I just kind of cut off the majority of the paper. I'm not going to be too precise because we're going to cut off and shape our little portions when we cut off the excess fabric. We'll be following those dotted lines anyways, so I kind of just, you know, do the best I can and know that I'll cut that all off later. So with any pattern, you of course want to make sure that you use that little test square and make sure that it measures correctly so that you know that you printed it out correctly. correctly. Now on all of Liza's patterns, she does have color-coded sections so that you can keep track of what colors are gonna go where. So as you can see, this part is yellow, and then we have the yellow here. It's a light yellow, but I can see it. You might not be able to see it on camera, but that would be all the background sections. But if you want to, you can go and grab some markers or pencil crayons and color on these little pieces of paper just so that you can keep track of, in case you're afraid that you know, you're gonna get lost on the way. I like to have the pattern handy as well so that I can see what it's going to look like when I'm done. And I think I'm gonna try to find some plain fabric for the top and then do something fun like this where it's all one fabric for each of the petals. And then there's a little stem piece down there, which will be this piece. So each of your little pieces though have letters and numbers. So this is the A piece. That's the first piece we're gonna start with. And it has A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, A6. And as we go, we need to follow those numbers to keep track of what we're doing. And so this is the A block, and then we move on to the B block, which is this one. And again, B1 to B5, so there's gonna be 5 pieces of fabric for this piece. But then, as you can see on this one, there is a little arrow, and then it goes B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, which means that all of these pieces, which is B, C, D, E, H, I, G, all these pieces, once these are sewn together, are going to attach to this piece. And then we have the E piece, which is going to attach to the bottom, and it shows on each piece the arrow. It's going to be like E is going to go here. This is the F piece. So the F piece is going to go with the E piece. E piece, F piece. So it's kind of like a paint by numbers in a way. You just got to keep track of your numbers, but once you're doing it, you'll completely understand. It just looks a little overwhelming at first, but this is, again, a little bit more of an intermediate block. But all of the steps apply for every block, so it shouldn't be too difficult. So now I'm gonna go and pull some fabric, and we're gonna figure out what fabric we're going to use for our daisy block. So I went and grabbed some fabrics that I think would look really cute together. So what I've decided is I have the green for the stem, which is this polka dotted green. I'm gonna do a bright yellow for the center of the daisy. I'm gonna do this purple gingham for the petals. And then we're going to use this gray polka dot for the outer area. The one thing I love about this project though is, like, I don't have a very big piece of this, but I'll be able to use it. This is the scraps that I like to keep, and you know, keeping these scraps is great for when you're doing foundation paper piecing. Okay, so I got some pencil crayons also, because I do want to just kind of roughly, so that I remember that this is going to be the gray, and then the gray is going to be here, and then my petal is going to be purple. So I'm going to color the petals. It doesn't need to be perfect because all this stuff's going to end up in the garbage anyway, so it doesn't need to be beautiful. There's going to be lots of, all this stuff is outer or background, which is going to be gray. gonna be that little centerpiece. There we go. So now it just looks like a little kid's arts and craft project. But that's okay. We're gonna start with the first piece, which is the top of our daisy, and we're going to be cutting a piece of fabric that will measure just the size of that daisy. I'm just gonna go over the materials and tools that I like to use when I do foundation paper piecing. I have this really fun spinning mat. This is by Honey Sew. It is a self-healing rotating mat. You can get these in a lot bigger sizes. This is perfect for the little blocks. And then I like to use this ruler. This is the 1x12 by Olfa, but it's actually 1 1/4. And so we're going to be using that quarter measurement a lot when we're foundation paper piecing. So I really like that one. I use rotary cutters with this self-healing mat. I like to use the little one, but if you have a big one, it's fine. You can use that too. And then I like to have my little quilting iron close by. And that is my little Liza. Some people like to have seam rollers, and they're just sort of like a brayer, but they're about this wide, and they are used to press open your seams. I don't have one of those. I have a large brayer that I could technically use, but I don't have one of the little ones that people like to use for foundation paper piecing. So if you need to iron your fabric beforehand to make sure everything is nicely flat, crisp, and beautiful, you can do that now. I'm going to go ahead and cut out the first piece of fabric I need, and you can go ahead and cut out the pieces that you need beforehand so that you have them all ready to go. And that is what I will be doing, but I'm just showing you how I like to go about doing this. So you can kind of, if you can see through your fabric, you can put it underneath. You just want a piece that's basically the square of that piece. Okay, so, and make it about a 1/2 inch larger on all 4 sides. So again, I crudely cut my fabric. It does not need to be precise. That's what I love about foundation paper piecing, is that you can kind of be messy, but then when you start doing it, it doesn't look messy. It looks beautiful and methodical, and it's like you put everything where it needed to go, and it all just falls into place perfectly. But everything before that was kind of a disaster. So that is our first piece. And then I'm going to look at the second piece, which is my A2. And this line right here between the A1 and A2 is going to be the line that we're sewing on first. So I'm going to need a piece that is the size of that. And then I'm going to cut a piece that is bigger than that piece. So now we have our first 2 pieces. I'm going to go ahead and cut out the rest of my fabric so that we can have everything all put together for this one little block. And if you want to label these pieces, you can do that too. What we're going to do is we're going to be sewing it from the front of our paper. So just remember that you always want to see the lines. When you put it down on the sewing machine, this is what we're going to see. So the fabric is going to be on the back. So what we're going to do is, if you have a light box or a window, you can easily see through your paper. So it's really important that you use just standard printer paper so that you can see through the paper, so you can see the fabric that's going to be laying behind it. Okay, so I'm going to take my first piece and I'm going to lay it onto the back, and we want to make sure that it is over this piece. That is our first daisy center. And you can hold it up to your light box so that you can see, yes, the fabric is going to be over all 4 edges of the first shape. And I like to have it about 1/4 of an inch up from the first line that we're going to sew. Okay, and then we're going to take the second piece and we're going to put that at the top where is the first line. So that's the line. We're putting the fabric on, lining it up at the top of the fabric there, because when we sew it, then we're going to be folding it up, and then that's going to cover the other portion, the A2. Now, if you have a right and wrong side, this fabric is going to be right sides up. So just remember that your fabric needs to be right sides together. Okay, now you can pin this, you can glue this onto the paper here temporarily. It'll wash out, it'll go away, but we can start by putting it under the sewing machine and sewing that first line. Here is a closer look. So as you can see the fabric behind my A1 and A2 line. Okay. So now I'm going to center my needle. I like to have that centered. And then I'm going to go to the one end and we're going to start back stitch and then stop at the end of that line, again locking our stitches. And this is when all the practicing for sewing straight lines comes into play. Take your time. And if you want to lower your stitch length, that'll actually help you when you go to remove the paper backing eventually. Some people like to lower it down to a 1.4. That makes things come off a little easier, but that's not going to be till later on because we need to sew all of our pieces first. Now I'm going to grab my cutting tools and have them close by. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fold down that first line of stitching. And I'm going to go to my little cutting mat and I'm going to find my 1/4 inch line and I'm going to cut a 1/4 inch just off of the seam allowance. And this is the only time I'm going to do this on this block because this was the first cut. From here, we're going to open up the paper and we're going to flip it and then we're going to open up the fabric. And this is where you can use your little roller, you can use your iron, just to make that nice and flat. So now we're going to move on to the next square, or in this case triangle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold the paper at that next mark. So it's A1 to A2 is going to have a line between with A3. So I'm going to fold the paper down, and it's going to be a little bit tricky just because it is on the inside, but just make sure it's folded on that line, and then you'll have some excess fabric. What you're going to do is you're going to take your ruler with that 1/4 inch, we're going to chop off that excess, just like that. And then we're going to open the paper back up and we're going to get another piece of your background. And we're going to take that and we're going to lay that right along that edge. And again, you want to make sure that when you go to open it up, it's going to cover up that whole piece that we're doing. And then I'm going to flip it over and then I'm going to sew my next line. Okay, so now we have our next piece in place. So from here, we're going to go back over here and do the number 4. So we can just leave that one for now, and we're going to fold down on that line, just like that. We're going to take our ruler and again, cut off that excess. Take our little piece of fabric. And then we'll take our little strip of fabric, place it on top. Make sure that when we flip it over, it's going to cover up our whole little triangle there. And then we'll flip it back and sew that line. Now we're going to move on to the A5, and we're going to be sewing this line. So again, we're going to fold the fabric over, and it will expose the excess fabric, and you can take your ruler and you can cut that seam allowance down, flip it back over, and then I'm going to line up the fabric, and then we will sew this line. But we can also do the other side at the same time. Since it's not connected to that portion, and I like to have a little bucket on hand to throw all these scraps in because it gets a little messy. So we have that piece, and then we'll have that piece. And then we'll sew both of those. Okay, now all we need to do, now that we have our block completed, is we're gonna flip it over, and we are going to follow those dotted lines and cut off all of the excess fabric, and if you're lazy like me, paper. Make sure your fabric is nicely pressed so that you're cutting it correctly. We want to make sure everything is nice and precise because this is going to affect the overall block once it's finished. So there we have it. That is our first little block. You can see the beginnings of the daisy. So hopefully this will help you with the rest of the block. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the little flower petal pieces and the stem off camera, and then once I have all of my portions, I'm going to come back here and we're going to put it all together to complete our very first block. Okay, so I have all of my little quilt blocks all complete, and I put them in the formation that they will be going into in order. So I like to refer to the image just to make sure everything looks right. And we're going to start to attach all the pieces together. So the first piece that I'm going to be attaching is the little stem is going to go onto the bottom of this center petal. Once I do that, then I can start attaching, and we're going to create this bottom block. Since this is already a block in itself, we're going to create this block. When we look very carefully, we have the outer seam allowance and we have the solid line. That's the line that we're going to be sewing our pieces together with. So that is the seam allowance. So when you place them together, we're going to go just like this. So you'll be able to sew right along that line there. And again, putting all of this together is going to be important because we want this to be nice and square. When we go ahead and attach it to this piece, we're going to have a nice square quilt block. So try to make these as perfect as we can get them. Okay, and that is how it's going to look. And we can go ahead and press that with our iron. And then after that, we're just going to take the next piece and we're going to make sure that the E is pointing towards the E piece and the G is pointing towards the G piece. And we're going to place those together. And we're gonna sew along that solid line. Okay, and we're done. How did it turn out? So cute. Now, not everybody's perfect, and that's okay. So this might look a little wonky in some areas, but you know, it is what it is, and I don't care. Do you care? So now that we have everything all sewn together, we can do the fun part, which is ripping off the paper. And because we use that smaller stitch length, then this part should be fairly easy and the paper will want to come off nice and quickly. Okay, and we're done. The paper is now all off the back. I gave it a good press and I'm ready to put this in another project. So I hope you enjoyed this video of me foundation paper piecing. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're new to the channel, and check out for the next video where I will be taking this beautiful block and turning it into a really fun project. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next tutorial. Bye guys!